And welcome into the hard count. It is National Signing Day. The two gentlemen next to me, Steve Wiltfong, Josh Newberg, have been on the air for the last 5 hours, give or take. 5 hours? 5.5. We did the National Signing Day show. Y'all did a commitment.
Isaiah Gibson to Tennessee, huge pickup.
Massive.
Isaiah Campbell.
Massive.
I knew I was going to do that at some point today, and I just
At least it was after the commitment.
Yeah, Isaiah Campbell to Tennessee, adding to the Vols' top 10 class. Tennessee hoping they're not done, looking to flip Jaden Prelati later today, USC commit.
It's a wild day in the sport in general, but today felt even more wild than previous signing days. And I have a lot less signing days under my belt than the two of y'all, but this felt like there was extra chaos. Going to get into all of it, as well as hear some of y'all's just insight behind the scenes and what this whole deal is. But Oregon swinging big. Texas is a monster. Michigan is like a whole new operation. A lot to unpack. Let's just start at the top. Most surprising part about today's National Signing Day, because I know y'all have the intel on most things. So something that you did not see this one, didn't have this one on my bingo card when we got in the studio this morning.
Well, there were quite a few things that didn't go the way the intel said it was going to go coming into the day. I think obviously one of the biggest stories of the day is Oregon flipping cornerback Naeem Oford. And kind of when you cover recruiting, you're trying to sift through a bunch of conversations and then try and piece together what's factual and what's true, because everyone's got their own reality, and then sometimes some people are just BSing you, right?
Yeah.
So
it's like you got to know what to wait,
right?
Like who to wait.
So with Naeem Oford, there were people adamant for the last several months that he was going to flip to Auburn, and I think there were people around the Plains that felt like he was going to end up in Auburn's class. So I have to think that they were given some indication to feel that way. But anytime I talked to his father, Kaori, he said, look, we think it's best for him to be out of state. He was committed to Ohio State, and he ends up committing to Oregon. So if I just would have rode one source and one source only, and you could because even like today, I talked to a source around Ohio State, and they said, we're hearing more about Oregon than we're hearing about Auburn. And you just kind of just are like, when you do this for so long, like sometimes you're just like, okay, I don't know if that's true or not, because when you stack up all our conversations and stuff, more people were saying Auburn than not, but obviously he ended up flipping to Oregon. That was one of the big stories of the day. Jaron Keesagapolitelli, 5-star quarterback from Hawaii.
Pronunciation again, once again on point.
You're giving me credit. We don't even know if that's an accurate. I know Jaron's accurate.
Sounds right to me.
Right.
Yeah.
And so
JSK.
Look, man, people around Jaron yesterday told me he was likely going to stick with Cal. A different source told Chad Simmons the same thing. And, he commits to Oregon. I talked to someone around Oregon. They said they didn't find out till 5 minutes before.
Yeah.
So, that stuff definitely happens. These kids sleep on it. They change their minds. Lincoln Cure, I think, was going to commit to Oregon over the weekend, but then he gets back to Goodland, Kansas, and he ends up sticking with this commitment to Kansas State, where at the same time, Kansas State was trying to flip Deshaun Brame from Tennessee. Now, would they have taken them both? I certainly would. But,
yeah, sure.
I don't know if one was to cover the other because they took that visit to Kansas, but it works out for Lincoln Cure. Tennessee hangs on to Deshaun Brame. Deshaun Brame actually flipped to Tennessee from Oregon. So look, darn near everybody that committed today had already been committed somewhere else at least once. So that's the world we live in recruiting right now. You have what I like to call the bachelor party commitment, which is one where you make your first commitment and then you get to celebrate it with your friends and your family, and then that is treated like it's a party. It's a bachelor party.
Yeah.
But then you get your real commitment later, which is like the wedding. And again, everybody comes back together and celebrates, except sometimes people like to create a shred of mystery. And most people honestly don't care. It's like, let's build this moment up and get the right fan base around it and focused on it. But then there are some that like to build up the mystery and see if they can't shock. And certainly that's exciting about signing day as well.
And my gauge for this whole thing feels like we have more movement when it comes to, like you just mentioned, someone's committed somewhere else, it changes on signing day. And I'm not speaking to any specific commitment, but I'm putting two and two together here. I'm like, okay, with money now being involved in a very explicit manner, feels like that's not a stretch to say that's a big reason for guys moving and shaking the way that this has gone. Is that the same gauge you're getting? I mean, you're closer to this than anybody. Is that kind of the same vibe?
It's absolutely a major factor in these young men's decisions. But the schools that are serious about football, that are competing for championships, they have gotten their resources and infrastructure in an order that allows them to be competitive on the recruiting trail. And then it's a matter of value, like how much do I value Josh Newberg? Maybe another program doesn't have the same amount of value for him based on whatever their protocols and checks and balances are. But in addition to that, though, kids still want to have good relationships with where they're going to go play. They want to be developed to the best of their abilities to play in the NFL, most of them. So it goes with that. We were talking to Shannon Terry about this earlier because he asked the same question. It almost goes without being said that you got to come correct in the NIL space.
Have to.
So those conversations are going to come. So sometimes coaches actually kind of get annoyed when that's all some kids want to talk about.
Sure.
Because dude, we're going to get there. We know you're not going to come here for $0 and 0 cents. Can you please act like you give a damn about getting on this board with me and talking about football?
We talk
or
inside
whatever.
Zone for 2 seconds, and then we can chop it up about
exactly
dollars
right.
and cents. Yeah.
But a lot of the kids, they still are picking their decisions on relationships, scheme, player development, and then certainly NIL opportunities. And then obviously all these young men come from different walks of life. So for some it's more important than others.
Yeah, money's relative.
Yeah.
Sure.
The amount of it's relative.
Josh.
Hold on.
Yeah, I was going to ask you a question. Yeah, go ahead.
I think also the one term that we didn't hear a lot of this cycle was resetting the market. We didn't hear a lot of recruits, quote unquote, resetting the market as we did last year and even the year before. And I think a little bit of that is because there's across the industry, across college football, there's a little bit of awareness of what each position goes for. And there's not a willingness to super overpay. But I'm coming full circle on this because, yes, NIL is involved, but what happens when NIL is equal?
Yeah.
We go back to recruiting.
Yeah.
It'll never be
we
equal.
go back. Well, I'm just saying when when teams are offering in the same ballpark.
Yeah. When it is
we're not resetting the market on every
Yes.
prospect.
I
It's
hear
just
you.
not happening.
Sure.
Okay. Every prospect isn't getting more money than is ever been paid at that position. So yeah, of course, some teams are in the ballpark of the same thing, and then it comes back down to relationships, location, all the things, development, all the things that we used to see in recruiting.
Which I think is interesting because you said this during the reaction or the actual signing day show, Steve. You're like, everyone sees Oregon, they know the narrative, they know the Phil Knight conversation, they know the Nike check, and you're like, no, actually, Oregon actually is legitimately a relational operation, and they work for these relationships where they land these top kids, and it paid off today. It split into 5 stars.
The thing about Oregon is there's just no weakness in their army right now.
Yeah.
They got great coaches on their staff, from the head coach to the coordinators to the position coach. They got a top-notch off-field recruiting staff, a well-oiled machine scouting department. They're very thorough. If you look at what they've done in the portal, they haven't had very many misses, have they, JD?
No, I mean,
the guys they
got
take
it
from the
dialed in.
portal, those guys come in and they make an impact on the two deep.
Yep.
And look, oftentimes when guys are in the portal, man, there's for some of them there's a reason. So they're careful. They're calculated on who they take. Those guys come in and they're difference makers for them. And again, with recruiting, they certainly do not show up to a gunfight with a knife.
No.
But in addition to that, man, they have great relationships with the kids they recruit. It's very important to Dan Lanning to know the player and their family and his assistant coaches. They team recruit. And Kaori offered, Naeem's dad. He said at the On3 Elite Series, and then doubled down on it a couple times during the process, that Dan Lanning was their favorite head coach.
Mm-hmm.
Now sometimes your favorite head coach still doesn't win the recruiting battle.
I've seen that before.
But look, they take nothing for granted there. And Dan Lanning has worked under some of the best head coaches in college football, from Nick Saban to Kirby Smart.
Yeah.
And now
not a bad tree.
He's here at Oregon, and there are a lot of resources behind this coaching staff, and they're a force to be reckoned with through recruiting. They're the #1 team in the country.
Yep.
They're coming to the great city of Indianapolis this weekend to take on #3 Penn State.
Yep.
I am very happy that the early signing period is in the first week of December now.
I was going to say, too, shout out to, is it Zionsville?
Yeah, we got
Big
friends
shout
watching
out to
in
Zionsville.
I mean, we had them
Yeah.
tuned in, man. We had some folks before the show let us know from Zionsville, hey, we're watching. So shout
Absolutely
out to Zionsville,
locked
Indiana.
into the show right now.
Yeah, 110%. Josh, Oregon aside, who was or maybe what was the recruitment or team or commitment where you're like, hey, didn't see this one coming? And outside of Oregon, who would that have been for you today? In a world where it feels like we have the day surrounding going into it, but then obviously
Yeah,
there's surprises.
South Carolina, I think had a big day flipping Mike Terry from Tyler from
yeah.
LSU. Then they flipped Demola Jidahun from Georgia Tech. I think the
they beat USC for Christian Ingram.
yeah, the Christian Ingram one, that was a big one. That was before our show even started. So things got kicked off really early with South Carolina. I mean, they made a run at Jared Smith. They made a run at Kevin Wynn as well, who ended up signing with Florida State. But yeah, Usman Chroma flipping from Georgia. Thought that was a bit of a surprise. Thought if you told me he was going to flip, I probably would have gone with Auburn in the moment.
Has he signed, do we know yet? Or are we still waiting on that?
He
Chroma is not signed.
but he's flipped his commitment.
Flipped. Okay, gotcha. Okay, I was
Yeah,
making
so
sure.
we're waiting on
making
that.
sure I didn't miss something.
There's
Okay.
one every year. Look, guys, the recruit these are it's the same stories every year, just different names. This year, Usman Chroma's the shocking commitment and not signed.
Yeah, hasn't
And
signed
then
yet.
we got a couple other high-profile guys that are dotting I's and crossing T's on whatever they have negotiated that haven't signed.
Yep.
Last year, you had Kelby Collins. I think it was Kelby Collins, or not Kelby. Might have been.
Well,
No,
we know we
it
had
was
Jeremy.
McCray.
Yeah,
McCray with Florida.
that signed with Florida, the five-star defensive
You always
lineman.
have some.
TJ.
Even Jeremiah Smith didn't send in his
That was
letter right
wild.
away.
That was wild.
But you knew it. Like, he was going to Ohio State the whole time. You're just getting it all situated.
Yeah, we're not in
yeah.
the same spot with David Sanders Jr. as we were with Jeremiah Smith at this time last year. David Sanders Jr., number one offensive tackle in the country, committed to Tennessee, has not sent in his LOI yet, but it doesn't seem to be a major concern for the Vols.
No, not at all.
Gotcha.
Just some final conversations being had, but I think he wants to be a Vol, and again, obviously there's some other teams that wait in the wings just in case it goes completely sideways. But I think
Certain team in Columbus, Ohio, hoping things go sideways potentially, and just kind of praying on that one.
Absolutely, but no, same stories every year, different names.
Fair enough. Josh, on a day like today, sitting with you at the desk, I was blown away by just like the encyclopedia of this thing you are. Like you're rattling off names, you're rattling off commitments, you're rattling off their rating. Are you like doing a bunch of like final exam studying for this? Or you just eat, sleep, and breathe it all year long? Is that the deal? Like talking about the just that whole living in this world.
JD, I don't get it, man. I don't do any studying. I just do 2 shows of Inside Scoop a week. I do 2 shows of Wiltfong Whip Around a week, and I can recite heights and weights and stars and rankings by heart. My fiance, she tells me our weekend plans on Thursday night. By Friday morning, I'm asking her, do we have any weekend plans?
Josh?
And she's like, I told you last, but these
fair.
recruits and stuff, it just all sticks.
I mean, Josh gets to have running dialogue with our best. We have the best team sites at On3.
100% true.
We have the best insiders at On3, and these are the guys that Josh is chopping it up with. We do live commitments. He has coaches on. The dude just gets to talk ball.
He gets it
all year. So good retention.
Yeah. It's retention. It's honestly, you eat, sleep, and breathe it. When I shut my eyes, these kids' names are running through my mind like a ticker on ESPN. It's second nature. And then today we've been covering this class not for 365 days.
Yeah,
we've been covering this class and Steve longer than I have, but from an On3 Recruit standpoint, probably like 450 days at this point that we've been covering the 2025 class in like very thoroughly. So, yeah, I mean, I remember these kids' first commitment. Now today on signing day, we're on their third commitment.
Both reclassifications, I mean, the high-profile ones, Julian Lewis and Jakeem Stewart, I was aware of them when they were in middle school.
Mm-hmm. Wow. It starts that early.
Well, that is not
for the
normal.
dudes, for the guys like
Julian Lewis I met at the quarterback retreat. I forget. Oh man, I'm struggling. He was in Indianapolis. He was in 7th grade, And then Jakeem Stewart, popped on the radar pretty early. I think Elijah Griffin had his first offer from Georgia in 8th grade. He signed with the Bulldogs today. There's some no-brainer type guys, and you're on these guys early.
Yeah.
So you brought up Jakeem Stewart, committed to USC.
Yeah.
Julian Lewis, previously committed to USC. We talked about Oregon, and this is just like a thought I had throughout signing day, and honestly, like over the last couple of days as we've seen Oregon do what they're doing. Like, everything to me, short of, a couple of different variables they haven't gotten correct, like USC should be the powerhouse in the West. Like USC should be doing what Oregon is doing right now.
Yeah,
now you have the Oregon money, that's obvious, the Nike backing, but like
in theory they should, but we've seen Oregon and Washington play much more meaningful games over the last 2 decades than USC. So, yes, we're older. We've seen different generations of USC teams be dominant, but the 20-something-year-olds, Washington and USC have played way more meaningful postseason games, and Oregon in particular has a lot of resources behind its program that make them truly unique, and they've done a really good job of hiring really good head football coaches to run their programs.
And those coaches hire good I mean, like, you look at the hires from Dan Lanning with Will Stein, Kenny Dillingham, Tosh LaPoy, like, they have knocked that crystal ball before that.
Right, and obviously before Will Stein, you had Kenny Dillingham, who's now at Arizona State playing for a conference title this year. And to be a really good coach, you got to have really good coaches on your line to replace the ones you're going to lose that people want to kind of tap into your magic and run their next program.
I just think it's so interesting because you talk about a place like Eugene, Oregon, and I've never been to Eugene. I'm sure it's lovely.
It is.
I would have to imagine a recruiting trip to Los Angeles might have a different level of juice if you're able to have the right things in place to maximize the opportunity there. So it's just I'm curious to see what happens in the next couple of years.
They're building a new facility at USC, and there's a lot of support around that program. I spent some time with Coach Riley and some of his staff when I was out there for the Elite 11 finals this summer. And he was happy with the progress they were making in the NIL space, and everybody's excited about the facility that they're building. I think you should be most excited about the coaches that he added to his staff, getting it right with Coach Deonton Lynn, Coach Henney, Coach Entz at the linebacker spot, Coach Belk in the secondary. Jakeem Stewart pointed towards nearly 100-spot improvement in total defense for USC is one of the reasons why he picked the Trojans.
For sure.
So again, yes, Jakeem Stewart, there was a resource that you needed to have to be in the game for him, but you also had to show him a situation where he could thrive on the field and have trust in a coaching staff to get the best out of him. And USC, they had the lead in 11 of their 12 games this year in the fourth quarter. They're close. They got to learn how to finish games. I think they bring back a quarterback next year that has showed some flashes. They're going to have some continuity with their coaching staff. This offensive line that they've been excited about recruiting is going to be a year older. USC is going to be a fun team to talk about all offseason. They're going to have some expectations.
Absolutely.
But I think that they have the pieces in place to rise to the occasion, and they certainly have the coaching staff.
I'm curious how heavily they hit the portal for some other pieces. I'm curious if they go get another big-time weapon for Mayava. They go get, some more guys up front, whether it be offensive or defensively. I feel like I'm with you because to have the lead that many times in the fourth quarter, it's not a stretch to say that USC can hang in the Big Ten. Like, we've seen them hang. Can you finish in the Big Ten? Whole other discussion. Josh, when it came to what happened today with Florida State, the math would say, hey, not a great year on the field. Mm-hmm. So with that being the case, you wouldn't expect to have the day that Florida State had. Is it like the new life when it comes to the coordinators? Is it a thing where they're selling the vision? Because I feel like it's not that far out of your consciousness of a recruit seeing Florida State go 13-0 and having great vibes around that whole operation. Like, is that what got it done? Like, what's going on?
I think a little bit of that. I think Steve said it great on our live show. I mean, Steve said Florida State just needed the season to end.
They did.
That was for Florida State, when you talk about recruiting, the worst part of Florida State's year was the season started.
But they had to keep playing. They had to show up.
Yeah, they had to show up every Saturday and play some football and get embarrassed and then lose some recruits and blah, blah, blah. And the cycle never stopped until the season ended. Then Mike Norvell had a chance to reset. He brought in some new coaches. He got rid of some old ones. And, of course, that created some chaos. But in the end, Florida State was able to rally. Although they lose Solomon Thomas, I mean, the one thing I would say about Mike Norvell in taking the next step on the recruiting trail is finishing these 5-star recruitments. I mean, between Travis Hunter, last year they lose Armando Blunt, a player at a position of need on the defensive line. They lose him to a rival. This year it's Solomon Thomas in the trenches once again, losing a 5-star recruit. But that being said, they're putting some pieces together. They're going to hit the portal. They have these new coaches. Unfortunately for Florida State, they just ran out of time. They ran out of time. If signing day was December 14th, I think this class would have been a little bit more juiced up. You saw what they did at the end of the season into signing day. If they had an extra 2 weeks, hey, who knows? But next year, I don't think they're going to win 2 games. They're going to win more than that. And
that would be surprising.
Maybe Mike Norvell gets it rolling again.
Yeah. Steve, one big reason we were excited to do this show, obviously outside of everything you bring to the table from an intel perspective and just, you being one of the GOATs in this industry, getting some behind-the-scenes stuff from you. And I asked you before the show, I was like, hey, I want to ask you X, Y, and Z. Are you cool with that? You're like, dude, just fire away. Ask me whatever you want. So I'm like, okay, here we go. What was the craziest text message you got today that maybe did or didn't happen when it comes to National Signing Day?
These are kind of loaded questions. My recall is not that great. There was nothing.
Oh, I was looking over. You were pretty disgusted at a couple texts you got.
Well, no, don't get me wrong. Like, there were some.
I mean, you were going through it at a couple points.
Yeah, no, it was nothing too.
I'm 100% putting you on the spot.
My
here,
man, there was
so
text that
me.
put your head in your hand. Like, you were like, there was text that were coming
Josh is
through.
just leaning into it.
Well, you guys would just be surprised. Like, I mean, I think like you're out here trying to tell a narrative to your readers, right?
Yeah.
100%.
You're diehard fans, and then it just changes so quickly, and it's like you just sit there and you're like, "There's no way they're gonna believe this shit."
Well, I'm sure fans.
Like
understand.
I'm not
the
lying.
diehards, the ones that follow forever, like they're like, "Yeah, man," like you. It's like, this is why I follow it, because it is so crazy. But you get like we're growing every year. It's so amazing, the interest in roster construction. It started with fantasy football, obviously, but it's like bleeding. Like, people are following recruiting more and more because there's just an interest in roster construction, and people are able to be more passionate fans. And you get these new fans, and it's like these things pivot and change, and you're just going through these things. And
I'm convinced there are fans on the On3 Recruits channel, on these message boards. There are some fans, believe it or not, that would rather see their team finish #1 in recruiting. They'll get more excited over #1 recruiting class than a national championship on the field, because
get in the way of recruiting.
Yeah, I mean, recruiting kind of is like a prestige thing. It's a measuring contest at times. Now it means your team has more money than the other team. Oh, this team's broke, our team has money. So there's a lot of ego.
There's some there's really good recruiters out there that are not good position coaches, but they do such a good job of forming good relationships with kids that people they're good dudes. You want to drink a beer with them or hang out with them, or they're good guys, but they're not going to develop you. But then there's an introvert that doesn't talk as much to you because he's rather watch film and maybe even be with his own guys. That's so his relationship and connection with you might be a little less. But the other guy just gets this reputation because he's a great recruiter year in and year out, but he's actually, if you really look at it, he's not that good of a coach.
Interesting.
It's just funny how being a good recruiter can elevate you beyond if you
your ability to
hide
coach.
your word as ability.
You know
to
what?
coach.
The coaches, Jeremy Pruitt used to tell me this all the time. It's all about the Jimmies and Joes. It's very, when it comes to college football, it's not as much about the X's and O's as it is about having the Jimmies and Joes.
What I would say is football is the ultimate team sport and scheme sport, and so there are times where kids pick the wrong school and don't meet their potential.
Yeah.
Oh,
yeah.
100%.
So,
yeah.
so they could be a Jimmy and Joe at somewhere else, but
Yeah, I think
they're not.
his overall message was
Right.
get the best players in America,
No
and guess
question.
what? You'll end up being a good coach.
Well,
Yeah.
there's no question about that.
Which makes a lot of sense.
I think we all agree with that, but it's not easier said than done.
Oh,
Like-
yeah.
Like,
So-
Nick Saban was so thorough on the evaluations. I think that's what made him and his dynasty so special and consistent. People be like, oh, it's so easy to recruit at Alabama. They listen.
The script day.
Like, first of all, there's some other good logos out there that they would have to beat: Ohio State, Georgia. But there's a lot of people. But my main point on that is there's a lot of good players standing outside the Roxbury, Alabama's football facility, trying to get in, and you have to like pick the right 25 that are going to maintain
Sure.
your culture, your scheme, and your roster, and they rarely miss.
Yeah.
I mean,
The
like
right DNA
to have
traits.
the consistency that they had. Now, obviously, within an 85-man scholarship team,
Right.
they would have some misses.
There's margin for error.
But when you compare it to other programs that didn't have the same consistency, and it was just people would just talk about how Coach Saban, when he would talk to a prospect, he would have to have his notes and stuff because he took such detailed notes and he was so involved in like this young man and like why they were taking him at Alabama. It was impressive, and so that was his. And then obviously he was a great closer because he could just tell you the truth. Where
yeah.
he wasn't selling you a dream. It was like, dude, if you can come here if you want, like we're still going to be really good. So
Yeah.
if you want to be the first.
See this
round
trophy
pick,
case?
yeah,
We're going to fill it up.
A lot of coaches got to
regardless.
sell a dream. He can sell the trophy case.
Sell trophy case, sell draft picks. Sell. I mean, like
And that's
sell
kind
the
of where
rings.
Kirby Smart's getting
heading.
at.
It's
Yeah.
kind of where they're trending, right? And I want to talk about Georgia here in a second, but I'm going to double back on that question I asked you about craziest text. How about this recruitment that was the most? How do I ask this? The recruitment that was contrary to the intel that was had leading into it. Like, hey, intel was pointing this, and then all of a sudden stuff pops up, and it's like, did not see that coming.
Well, I mean, today.
Wilson?
Yeah, so today with Dallas Wilson, look, man, I wake up, the first source I can talk to, I get a
Started
text.
last night. Really.
I wake up and I get a text from Keith Niebuhr that tells me that there's optimism around Florida, for lack of better words.
Sure.
All right.
Gators
all right.
Online, go. Yeah.
And so that's Keith, like, can you basically asking if we can, like, confirm
it,
together,
yeah.
right?
Sure.
So my first call is around Gainesville.
Okay.
Not going to go to Oregon, Florida, or Miami. Okay. I take that as a little bit of gamesmanship, like we're ahead of Miami, but we're just not going to say that, but we'll give you this little carrot.
Okay.
So I send the call down to Coral Gables area.
Okay. Yeah. 305.
It ain't going to be us.
Okay.
We're hearing that it's going to be Florida, right? So
That's what they thought.
now you got to wait because it was 5 something in the morning
Right.
where I was at less than so I talked to some people out and around Eugene. He's great last night. Like, to them, they would be stunned. So I write an article basically saying that. It was an article that I was proud of in the moment of like, here is the story on Dallas Wilson holistically from above. And you can and then the fans can take the information from it that they want the most and be happy about that and ignore the rest. And for me, I'm like, I don't really know what he's going to do.
Yeah.
Okay?
You think you might.
So
but-
I don't have a prediction in. I'm like, to me, this could do a couple different things because I haven't put it all together. Then you get a message out of Eugene area that says like, well, this might be a battle. And it might have been, right?
Yeah.
This might
I mean,
be
it seems like it was.
This might be a battle. So then when you combine that with like all the other people saying this dude's going to Florida, like, all right, well, let's put in the prediction of Florida.
You're ready to call
Because
it.
we're at the end of the day, man, we want you to come to On3 and know what we're thinking and have a fun, entertaining time. Like, you're part of it. You get to talk about it on our message board. That prediction adds to the excitement. More people are paying attention to Dallas Wilson. I don't think, to me, that stuff doesn't ruin the moment. Like, it's like it's bringing people to the moment.
100%.
So, like when A-Rod was announced to the Yankees, the amount of people that were standing outside that press conference, they knew what they were showing up for, but it did not damper the excitement, right? So we predict Dallas Wilson to Florida, and maybe there was a moment today where Oregon had to remind him, like, dude, you've been committed here 2 years. Like, you know what you're getting here. You love us. We love you. I know you're having some late conversations because these are big decisions, man.
Yeah.
And Florida's a great opportunity. Miami's a great opportunity. Billy Napier is a great dude, great coach. Mario Cristobal is at his alma mater. He's got so much love for that place. It's contagious. But Oregon, he was obviously committed there for a long time. Barely took visits, and he ended up going to Oregon. So whether Florida ever – so the one thing I don't know or don't have clarity on, I guess, is did Florida ever lead today or not? But it doesn't matter. He signed with Oregon, and Oregon got it done. Now, the one thing I do know is that, like, he visited Florida for the win over LSU, and he was slated to visit for the Ole Miss game on an official visit, and didn't take that. Right?
Interesting. Okay.
And that was pretty much the story of his recruitment. And he was pretty darn solid in this era of recruiting. Now that he put pen to paper, he was about as solid as you can be. He never decommitted. He barely took visits elsewhere. I mean, we are in a landscape where dudes commit early. They have 2 bachelor party commitments.
Yeah, there we go.
Dallas Wilson committed to Oregon, barely visited any other campuses, and then signed with Oregon. That doesn't happen very much.
Spick and span.
Like, now you get your guys like Tavian St. Clair. He's from Ohio. He committed to Ohio State. You never thought twice. Sanchez from Texas, the corner, number 1 corner, On3 Industry, committed to Ohio State, never wavered, never took another visit. But Dallas Wilson seemed to always kind of be in the news as someone we were keeping an eye on, and he stuck through all the way. Oregon, just what a class, man. I mean, today was a great day for Oregon, but they've had a lot of good days, man. How about DeCorian Moore on the 4th of July?
The fireworks.
There was so many people. It's kind of similar to Naeem Alford in a way, right? It's like he decommits from LSU, and there was just like this assumption from a lot of people around the area that he was going to go to Texas.
Yeah.
And you just kind of get swept up in it. You still have a few people that tell you, I don't think he wants to stay in state or he's not going to Texas. But it's like drowned out by the masses of like people you're talking to saying like he's going to go to Texas. But nope, on the 4th of July, he commits to Oregon and never wavers.
No.
Yeah.
Took one visit to LSU during the season.
Big game.
For the Bama game, Death Valley at night.
And look, we'd be naive to think that there weren't some conversations had on that trip.
There should be.
But it would have took a lot to obviously move him off even thinking about going to Oregon. So he committed to the school he grew up liking, LSU at first. Jamar Chase, I think, was his favorite player. But he ends up going to Oregon. Junior Adams is as good a dude as you're going to find, people say, as a receivers coach. Again, Dan Lanning's involved. Will Stein's got the Texas connections where he was the OC at UTSA.
Yep.
And so they get it done.
Yeah.
And you know who else just got it done?
Well, we got some news.
They just
breaking
The
news.
Vols. Okay.
Didn't see this coming.
How about it, huh?
They just flipped Jaden Perlotti from USC and Tennessee. They got a top 10 class. Linebacker was one of the positions of emphasis for them this cycle, for them to go out and get Jaden Harmon to beat Georgia for Christian Gass. That was a
big
major
one.
recruiting
Big
win.
hold, right?
And really, like, Georgia tried to poke a hole in that all the way through, and he barely wavered.
Did we get any finality to another linebacker, Tavian Wallace?
Yeah, he's stuck with Arkansas.
Oh wow, that was a big one.
That story was just on repeat. Like in the summer, there was we were just spent more time covering Florida State and Georgia in that, and then he committed to Arkansas. And then today and yesterday and the day before, we spent more time covering Florida State and Georgia, and he picked Arkansas again. So Tavian Wallace is like, hey,
Arkansas beat Florida State and Georgia for Tavian Wallace.
And Madden Iamaleava in the vein of Tennessee flips from UCLA to Arkansas. I want to go back to Tennessee really quickly, though, because I think what they are doing in terms of roster building, and we said it during the show, Heupel will have a quarterback.
Yeah.
The offense and the quarterback will attract receivers. They will have skill players. Landing a guy like a Perlotti, landing a David Sanders, assuming he signs, the way they're working up front
Isaiah Campbell, who just committed on our channel.
Tennessee's going to be Tennessee's like not taking a backseat to anybody on the physicality. Like the offense in itself will scheme around talent, will scheme around the trenches. If Tennessee gets up to par on the line of scrimmage consistently,
well, they certainly are this year.
Right now they are, and we're seeing it. And if this is the tone for Tennessee going forward,
no, they're built to last, man.
They're going to be around for a long time.
No, they are. They completely changed the mentality of that program. Steve Sarkisian did that at Texas. I mean, when he got to Austin, they were a powder puff program, and that's kind of what Lincoln Riley's having to fix at USC.
Sure.
Texas did not have a whole lot of draft picks on the line of scrimmage on both sides of the ball. They had some receivers. We'd see some running backs pop up, obviously some quarterbacks. But that's not where the game is won consistently. And so Texas, they get in there. They start taking these 300-plus studs on the offensive line, Kelvin Banks and company. And then they just have a body type, and they just keep stacking them, and they're just ferocious up front, and they're doing a good job developing them. And on defense, my biggest takeaway early on with Coach Sark and those guys is they were winning recruiting battles they were beating SEC schools. They weren't in the SEC yet, but they were going into Alabama. They were going into Mississippi and those regions, keeping their best players in state, beating SEC schools for difference makers. And you watched that Texas A&M game. Texas A&M, the one thing that they were this year was physical, tough, and they didn't beat themselves for the most part. And they had some very inconsistent quarterback play. Texas had some plays in that game where it was a line of scrimmage deal. A&M is not soft, and Texas whipped them.
Yeah, absolutely.
And, I think that the Georgia game, the way Georgia came out was like a reminder of that's what we want to be. That's what we got to do every week, because Georgia needed that game because they had already had the one loss. Texas is capable of playing like that. That was the first half. They kind of just got hit in the mouth a couple times. But they are capable of doing that to teams, and we saw that against Texas A&M. And it's going to be exciting to watch this SEC title game and then Texas in the playoffs. And you see Colin Simmons, the true freshman, just getting pissed during the game. like this team,
edge.
They have an edge to them. They have a lot of big boys that can control the line of scrimmage. They fixed it.
Yeah.
And that's what USC's trying to do. They land guys like Jakeem Stewart, and that's what Tennessee has done. That three-man front that they have is ferocious. They have edge players that are versatile. Their linebackers fly around. They got safeties that'll come down and wallop you in the alley. And, you got to be very physical in football these days. And Texas has created that DNA, and they bring in another class to keep it rolling.
Without question.
And Tennessee's doing that as well. And college football has never been more exciting, because you look at this college football playoff and the parity of these football teams, and you look at a team like Notre Dame, and there were times where you go into the postseason and you're like, well, if they run into a certain SEC team,
right,
they're not going to have a chance. I don't think you can say that for anyone.
No. The
way you've watched games this year and see some cross conference and some lower teams in their leagues really give team hell. Like this playoff, this 12-team playoff, there's going to be 8 teams, I think, that you could not be surprised if they win.
Sure.
Now, obviously, they'll be a favorite when you look at Oregon and Texas, and then Georgia. those would be the three that I would pick first.
That's
and then
yeah.
Ohio
Versus
State
the
would be
field.
then my dark horse. But if you give
Ohio
me
State's probably in there, yeah.
well,
Absolutely.
yeah.
Roster talent, $20 million roster,
course.
and the Michigan
Yeah.
thing is concerning.
Sure.
But no, I mean,
Sure.
Georgia. I cannot wait to watch Georgia in round 2 against Texas. As we talked about it today, and Josh, I'd be curious to get your thoughts here. But I want to make sure we wrap up here because y'all been on the air for 6 hours, I think, give or take. But I want to touch on a few schools really quick.
Yeah.
Georgia. Talked about it during the broadcast. Saban being out of college football. Everyone looks to Kirby Smart. I was talking about it with Caden Smith out there in the office before we got going here. So Nick Saban never came and saw me in high school. Surprise, surprise. I would imagine, though, if he did come to my high school, certain buzz, everyone in the hallway saying, hey,
Right.
Saban's on campus.
The helicopter just
Feels
landed.
like that's Kirby right now. Feels like if you want to go to the NFL and you live in the southeastern part of the United States or somewhere else in the United States, Georgia's probably the school to go to in that regard based on a track record. Other schools in the mix, for sure, not saying they're they're alone. They're the it school right now. Is that fair to say, or where does Georgia fall in your mind
Yeah,
in the rest of the landscape?
They're the it school. Just ask number 1 recruits. Number 1 defensive lineman, Elijah Griffin, committed to Georgia. Number 1 edge rusher, Isaiah Gibson, committed to Georgia. Number 1 linebacker in America, Zayden Walker, committed to Georgia. Number 1 tight end, Elias Williams, committed to Georgia. So, yes, JD, I think you can see that these top athletes understand right now that the program, like you just said, however you described it, and I'm not saying that they're at the level that Nick Saban had Alabama.
Sure.
But if there
Takes
is
time.
a program on the rise like that right now, it's Georgia, and you're seeing that with potential back-to-back number 1 recruiting classes in this year and last year.
Michigan's on fire. Michigan's absolutely rolling. To pivot a little bit away from Georgia, obviously you flip the number 1 player in America, and Bryce Underwood had a big win today at the linebacker position, landing a 4-star caliber player there. Like Michigan, at last I checked, chilling at number 7
Yeah.
in the recruiting rankings.
Michigan had a recruiting win today. They went out there and landed a young man by the name of Travis Moten from Kentucky. He is 6'5", 250 pounds. He's going to come to Michigan without much fanfare. But if you turn on his film, he's making a living behind the line of scrimmage. And that's kind of what their identity has been built on, is finding traitsy guys. Like you see Travis Moten walk in, and you're like, like
That's what they look like.
Like he's
That's what
got
they look
the
like.
traits. Just dude, you can't find everybody.
Yeah.
But they've just found guys. They have a great strength and conditioning program. They put these guys in positions to be successful schematically on Saturdays. And easier said than done, but voila, that's been Michigan's
their
recipe.
recipe.
You know, that's what Sharon Moore and company are trying to duplicate now at Michigan here. But they, they know what it looks like. They have a great, healthy culture. Their players played hard this year. They bounced back from some tough losses and kept it rolling. And I know that they're excited to get another ball game.
Yeah.
Certainly the expectation every year is to play in the college football playoff if you're Michigan, but they just want to play some ball too. So they're going to get to play another ball. They earned it. They beat Northwestern, then they beat Ohio State. They got some nice momentum coming into the holiday season.
They do the things, just from Jim Harbaugh to now Sharon Moore, they do the things that don't require any talent. They do it at a high level. They are gritty. They are physical. They are, like you mentioned, the culture. Like they do things that you can't recruit well, and now they're recruiting well because that was already working well before with how they developed, and obviously won a national championship with a lot of guys that, not all, but a lot of guys that came in that weren't 5-star prospects necessarily like that, like Ohio State has, like other schools have that they beat. That's kind of scary.
But that's
scary.
and I tell people this, it's kind of funny. People like I always get. Like, yes, I'm part of a company. We rank players, and we're excited that people have interest in that. And I do think rankings matter when you look at kind of the programs that are the contenders year in and year out. But it's like Michigan won the national championship without any 5-stars. Well, the first round of the NFL draft had Michigan players in it, so they had guys that should have been 5-stars.
Absolutely.
Aiden Hutchinson should have been a 5-star, and the list goes on. So
JJ McCarthy.
So look. The recruiting rankings are just a preview and a projection of where your team could be.
Sure.
But you still get to go out and write your own script.
Yeah, and to be able to squeeze the potential out of those players, Michigan seems to do as well as anybody.
Yeah.
Well, hey, what a day. What a day.
That was fun. Look, let's talk a little Keelan Russell before we
Let's go. Yeah, heck yeah.
He's committed to Alabama. He flipped from SMU. And I think Keelan Russell is an exciting recruiting win for Alabama because I think he could have gotten more to go elsewhere.
Interesting.
But he wanted to go to Alabama to play on what he thought was the biggest stage in college football, to give him a chance to win the national championship, win the Heisman Trophy.
Yeah.
Play for a coaching staff he believes in that really developed Michael Penix. Because if you look at Kalen DeBoer, he played his best football, or excuse me, Michael Penix, he played his best football anytime he was around Kalen DeBoer.
Mm-hmm.
Like Michael Penix, I think it was, I was talking to another parent. When he was in the portal, he visited UCF, and another parent was like, it's a no-brainer to come back home and go to UCF. He's like, yeah. His dad was like, yeah, probably, but we got one more visit. We're going to go out to Washington, way across the country. Because they just knew his son's potential. They just knew the potential of Penix underneath Kalen DeBoer. And sometimes the best decision for you isn't the easiest decision for you.
Yeah.
And Keelan Russell and SMU's great, man. I mean, they got a chance to make the college football playoff, play for it all.
Yeah.
But Alabama was the stage he wants to be on, playing those big games in the SEC week in and week out. And he was locked in solid, man. Schools tried to flip him late. Colorado went down to visit him. Texas A&M lost Husan Longstreet. Darn well they called.
Sure.
Never any movement.
Yeah.
He felt invested in helping recruit this class. Again, Alabama is everything he was looking for, and he's excited to get there. And he's got a chance to be the Gatorade National Player of the Year this year.
Yeah.
And then he's going to go to Alabama and chase that Heisman Trophy. And, that was one of the cooler stories of the cycle for me.
And it's funny, too, because SMU winning on Saturday against Clemson is actually the back door that Alabama needs opened to get into the college football playoff, in my opinion.
Right now.
So he's got to root for.
Bama's got first at large.
Yeah, he's got to
in my
root
opinion.
for.
Yeah, he's
his
rooting for his old
team.
school.
Oh yeah,
for it last year.
I get what you're saying. Like Bama's in theoretically right now, as long as SMU, who is the favorite, doesn't get upset.
As long as, so I think they're 2.5-point favorites. As long as Clemson doesn't beat them, because I think SMU would drop back in that large spot. That in theory Alabama
gets bumped out.
In my opinion.
Yeah, there'll be a whole lot of public debate on where
there already is.
Yeah, man.
Just like there was today on the On3 network, as the diehards found recruiting. We really appreciate it, even when you're busting us up for not being on these at the end. Some of these get a little wild. So I just very thankful to everybody that was reading On3 for the 2025 recruiting cycle.
Mm-hmm.
Happy holidays, man. I appreciate you having me on
Hey,
your
appreciate
show.
you, man. Hey, seriously, best in the industry. Steve Wiltfong and Josh Newberg, man, holding it down. Hey, we appreciate the heck out of y'all spending National Signing Day with us here on the On3, almost said On3 Recruits
I know,
channel.
you almost did.
I almost did. Hey, follow the On3 Recruits channel. Follow the On3 channel right here. We appreciate y'all. We love y'all. Going to keep this party rolling, and we will see y'all next time.